This is something that I think is so important. The whole Jeffrey Epstein thing, and I have to say, in a way, the American right kind of made this monster, and it's now sort of attacking them, where it became like every person who ever talked to Jeffrey Epstein, who ever met Jeffrey Epstein, somehow had suspicion on them that they were a pedophile or had an interest in.
This is no longer damage control. What we're watching now feels more like a counterstrike collapsing in real time. For years, many believed this empire was untouchable, polished, protected, insulated by money and silence. But the moment the response began, something strange happened. Instead of containing the situation, it seemed to expose far more than the original leak itself. What surfaced wasn't a simple denial. It was a reaction. Posts began disappearing. Major outlets suddenly went quiet. Legal pressure allegedly started moving behind the scenes, and then one rival decided to push even harder. Within hours of the Epstein file release circulating online, the name of Jay-Z began appearing in discussion threads tied to an FBI intake record referencing a Florida property from 1996. Almost immediately, 50 Cent jumped into the conversation publicly, posting that he wanted to produce a documentary about the situation. Instead of fading away, the tension escalated. Rumors began spreading that Jay-Z had quietly left the United States. At the same time, analytics accounts claimed that Beyoncé was suddenly losing millions of followers across social platforms. Whether those numbers were accurate or exaggerated hardly mattered. The perception was already spreading, and the silence from the couple's usual media allies only made things look stranger, because none of those reactions matched a story that was supposed to be harmless. The timing felt wrong, the responses felt coordinated, and the retreat felt very visible. Whatever mechanism had been activated behind the scenes seemed bigger and older than a typical celebrity controversy. Inside the Carter circle, the reaction reportedly hardened almost immediately. According to industry chatter, the focus wasn't on clarification. It was on containment. References to the file began disappearing from social media. Gossip accounts went quiet. Some entertainment outlets that normally rush towards celebrity scandals appeared hesitant to touch the story at.
So first, I think we just have to say, and you set it up well, there are two real storylines here. One is what is in these files that we can see and that we can actually learn. We're going to get on that first. There's also the story about what is not in these files or what is heavily redacted, because that is also sparked.
Starve the story of oxygen. Remind people where their access comes from. But that approach often works best when everyone involved plays by the same rules. And this time, someone clearly wasn't interested in doing that. On January 31st, 50 Cent posted a blunt message online, reacting to Jay-Z's name appearing in discussions around the Epstein material. His post read, "Damn, they got your man Jay in the Epstein files. I might have to do a doc on this." The tone didn't sound curious. It sounded provocative. Within hours, the jokes escalated. Memes, AI-generated images, and captions implying he knew exactly which nerves he was hitting. People close to the situation claimed the tone shifted even further after alleged legal warnings surfaced. But instead of backing down, he pushed harder, teasing the idea of exposure, daring anyone to try and stop him. In an industry where threats often lead to quiet compliance, that refusal alone was disruptive. The quiet explanation circulating behind the scenes was simple. Supporters said Jay-Z's name appeared only in an unverified FBI intake report, logged in 2019 referencing an alleged incident from 1996. According to that version of events, the story should have ended there. But the reactions didn't match that script. There was no direct denial. Instead, the narrative vacuum grew larger, and into that vacuum stepped speculation. Observers began asking uncomfortable questions. If the record was meaningless, why trigger such aggressive suppression? If the claim was unreliable, why not confront it directly? For years, Beyoncé has been known for running one of the most tightly controlled brands in entertainment. Precision, discipline, absolute command over the narrative. But this moment seemed to test that machinery. Legal pressure replaced public reassurance, silence replaced explanation. Even longtime allies appeared hesitant to speak, and that silence collided with someone who refused to stop talking. Meanwhile, 50 Cent kept posting.
So what happens now is this is simply a civil complaint. And in a civil complaint, it goes through the technical legal process. Now, the distinction, Jessica, between civil and criminal, of course, is that civil is for monetary damages, right? The system can only reward you with money. There's allegations that this 13-year-old is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, suffered depression, etc. So now you go to fact
He referenced his recent success producing documentaries that dismantled powerful figures, reminding audiences that he knows how to turn allegations into headlines and attention. He joked about smelling popcorn and beef, framing the situation like entertainment, while making it clear he wasn't intimidated. Industry veterans noted that the strategy might actually be calculated. By keeping the conversation alive, he forces the silence around the Carters into sharper focus. Every hour without a response makes the insinuations feel heavier. At the same time, fans began noticing something else. Some outlets known for aggressively covering celebrity scandals didn't touch the story at all. Others quietly removed posts referencing it, screenshots circulated online showing mentions disappearing without explanation. That triggered another question entirely. Was this coincidence or influence? The name most frequently mentioned when people asked that question was again Beyoncé, not as a subject of allegations, but as someone powerful enough to control narratives. Whether true or not, that perception alone shifted the story. Suddenly, the question wasn't just about something that allegedly happened decades ago. The question became what was happening now, and who was controlling it. Meanwhile, rumors about Jay-Z being abroad continued circulating online. People close to the couple reportedly described any travel as precautionary, but no one clearly explained why precaution was necessary, and that lack of clarity fueled darker interpretations. Some observers suggested the silence wasn't about dignity, it was about risk. Responding publicly might open doors better left closed. By this point, the original allegation almost felt secondary to the behavior surrounding it. One intake record had triggered legal pressure, media, silent social media backlash, and a rival publicly daring the empire to react.
If we get to the bottom of Tupac's, when that is finally revealed, 15 other will be revealed with it. And you will find that they were all committed by the same two people, father and son.
Each piece alone might be dismissed. Together, they formed a pattern that refused to settle. And the more the Carters pulled inward, the more space they created for outsiders to define the story. Now the tension feels less like a celebrity scandal and more like a stress fracture running through an entire ecosystem. Old rumors, new leaks, strategic silence, public provocation. None of it has produced a definitive answer yet, but everything feels unstable. Which leaves a series of questions hanging over the entire situation. Is this silence confidence or containment? Is this just internet speculation or something bigger? Is 50 Cent bluffing? Or is he waiting for the right moment to reveal something heavier? And if this is how power reacts to being mentioned in a rumor, what does that say about what it might be afraid of? If you want, I can also make here is a longer continuation expansion of your rewritten script that keeps the same dramatic investigative tone and pacing. What makes the situation even more volatile is the widening circle of attention. The conversation is no longer confined to celebrity gossip accounts or conspiracy threads. It is spreading into broader cultural discussions about power, influence, and the invisible networks that shape the entertainment industry. When a name like Jay-Z appears anywhere near something connected to Jeffrey Epstein, even indirectly, it doesn't just trigger curiosity, it activates years of public skepticism about how elite circles operate behind closed doors. For many observers, the concern isn't simply whether a document exists, it's about what happens when that document collides with a system built on silence. Because history has shown that powerful networks rarely collapse because of one accusation. They unravel when attention refuses to move on. And right now, attention is doing the opposite.
What I've gathered from your articles, this seems to be a global network that Epstein was a part of, and I believe there are multiple Epsteins. Like, I don't believe that Jeffrey Epstein was the head of the snake. Yeah, like, you know, they never go after the head of the snake. They never go after
the head of the snake, quote unquote, are just, it's the billionaire class, and so there's a faction of these billionaires in our oligarchy. And of course, the American oligarchy, you know, the American oligarchs don't necessarily, a lot of them don't have an allegiance necessarily to the United States.
Inside entertainment circles, there are already whispers that executives and artists are watching the situation very carefully, not because they necessarily believe the rumors, but because they understand how quickly reputational damage can spread once a narrative takes hold. Several industry veterans have pointed out that the modern media environment doesn't operate the way it did 20 years ago. Back then, a handful of major outlets controlled the narrative. Today, a rumor that begins on a small account can circle the entire internet before traditional media even decides whether to acknowledge it. And by the time those outlets weigh in, the public has often already chosen what it believes. That dynamic puts enormous pressure on anyone caught in the center of the storm. Meanwhile, 50 Cent appears to understand that dynamic better than most. For years, he has built a reputation for turning conflict into leverage. What begins as a joke or a meme often evolves into something much bigger once it captures public attention. In this case, his repeated references to a potential documentary are not being interpreted as random trolling. Some analysts believe it's a calculated signal, a way of reminding the industry that stories people try to bury often become the most profitable ones to tell later. And that possibility alone may explain why the response from certain corners of the entertainment world has been unusually cautious. At the same time, supporters of Beyoncé and Jay-Z argue that the entire situation demonstrates the dangers of internet speculation. They point out that an FBI intake report is not evidence of wrongdoing. It simply records information that someone submitted to authorities. In many cases, those reports never lead to investigations at all. From that perspective, the current controversy says more about the online rumor cycle than it does about the Carters themselves. But even those defending the couple acknowledge that the silence surrounding the story has allowed speculation. Silence in a crisis can mean many things. Sometimes it reflects legal advice. Sometimes it's a strategic decision to avoid amplifying an unverified claim. But in the age of constant digital commentary, silence can also become a narrative in itself. When people expect an immediate response, and none arrives, they begin interpreting the absence. And once interpretations begin spreading, they can take on a life of their own. That's exactly what appears to be happening now. Another factor adding tension to the moment is the symbolic status of the Carters within the entertainment industry. For decades, Jay-Z and Beyoncé have represented a version of success that many fans view as untouchable. They are not just musicians. They are brands, institutions, and cultural icons, which means any controversy involving them instantly becomes larger than a typical celebrity scandal. It becomes a test of how resilient that image really is, and whether the machinery protecting it can withstand sustained pressure. Observers also note that public fascination with stories connected to Jeffrey Epstein has never fully disappeared. Years after his death, people continue searching for answers about who moved within his orbit and how those relationships operated. Every new mention, no matter how small, reignites that curiosity. And because so many questions from that era remain unresolved, the threshold for speculation is unusually low. In other words, once a name appears in the conversation, it becomes extremely difficult to remove it completely. For now, no official confirmation has emerged supporting many of the rumors circulating online, but the conversation itself continues expanding. Fans analyze social media metrics, commentators debate the meaning of silence, critics argue about media influence and celebrity power. And through it all, 50 Cent keeps nudging the conversation forward with posts that blur the line between satire and provocation. Each new comment reignites the cycle, whether the story ultimately fades.
As we've seen dozens of new photos we haven't seen before of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell with very high-profile people, celebrities, people like Mick Jagger and Michael Jackson, like you showed, also like British royalty and actors. All of that we sort of knew was happening. I want to highlight specifically two for the public interest, and that is President Clinton and President.
If new details emerge, the pressure will intensify. If nothing surfaces, attention may eventually drift elsewhere. But at this moment, the situation feels suspended between those two possibilities, a moment where silence, speculation, and rivalry are colliding in real time. And in an era where narratives move faster than facts, that combination can turn even the smallest spark into a wildfire. For now, the questions remain unanswered. Why has the response been so quiet? Why has the conversation spread so quickly? And why does it feel like everyone involved is waiting for the next move? Because in a standoff between silence and speculation, the outcome often depends on who speaks first or who reveals something that can't be ignored. And until that happens, the tension surrounding Jay-Z, Beyoncé, and 50 Cent is unlikely to disappear. If anything, it may only continue building. If you want, I can also add another 2,000-3,000 words to this script to make it perfect for a 12 to 15 minute YouTube video with higher retention. Here is a further extended continuation of your script, keeping the same suspenseful documentary tone and pacing while deepening the narrative. What complicates the situation even further is how quickly perception begins replacing proof. In the digital age, the speed of a narrative often matters more than the evidence behind it. By the time facts arrive, opinions have already hardened. And right now, perception is moving fast. Clips, screenshots, and commentary threads continue spreading across social platforms, each one adding another layer to a story that still lacks clear answers. Some users claim they are simply asking questions. Others insist the entire situation is being exaggerated for views and attention. But the volume of discussion alone has already shifted the atmosphere. What once looked like a rumor is now being treated like a cultural moment. And that shift places enormous pressure on everyone connected to the narrative. Part of the reason this conversation
What do they stand to gain from it? I don't think anyone really knows at this point, because it's very, we have to be kind of speculative here, because we're not going to get like an admission from the Trump administration about what they're actually thinking. They're obviously worried about PR and optics, and they have continued for months to kick this can down the road and try and make it.
So when a name like Jay-Z appears even indirectly in discussions tied to that world, curiosity immediately surges. Not necessarily because people believe the worst, but because they believe there may be more they were never told. Meanwhile, the rivalry factor continues adding fuel to the situation. For years, 50 Cent has built a reputation for challenging powerful figures in the entertainment industry. Sometimes those confrontations are playful, sometimes they escalate into prolonged public feuds. But what makes his role here interesting is the way he frames his comments. Instead of making direct accusations, he positions himself as an observer, someone reacting to what the internet is already discussing. That distinction matters. By staying in that space between commentary and confrontation, he keeps the conversation alive while avoiding the legal risks that come with making explicit claims. Industry observers say that strategy has become increasingly common in the era of social media storytelling. You don't have to prove anything to keep people watching. At the same time, supporters of Beyoncé and Jay-Z argue that the situation highlights a different problem: the internet's appetite for controversy. They point out that major public figures are constantly mentioned in rumors or speculative reports that never lead anywhere. In that sense, silence might not be evidence of fear or strategy. It might simply be the most effective way to avoid amplifying a story that lacks veracity.
Sometimes you receive more with not doing well than you receive. I threw an excellent pitch.
We wouldn't even bring it up.
Verification, because responding directly to speculation can sometimes give it more visibility than it would have received otherwise. That calculation, whether to speak or remain silent, is one of the most difficult decisions public figures face in modern media culture. Still, observers keep pointing to the unusual combination of reactions surrounding this moment: the alleged legal pressure, the sudden disappearance of posts, the rivalry with 50 Cent playing out in public. Each piece on its own might be dismissed. Together,